Starting off at number 10 now, we have the Grunch. This one comes from Louisiana. In the early days of New Orleans, there was a road called Grunch Road that went deep into the swampy woods before coming to a dead end. That is where the Grunch people lived, a strange hybrid of albinos and dwarves, forced away from society and made to live in their own community. As the years went by, people started to doubt the story's authenticity, but it sparked up again when people started disappearing down Grunch Road. Nearby farmers reported their animals missing or finding them dead and drained of blood. Many locals now refuse to head down Grunch Road for fear of meeting the same fate. Moving on to number 9 now, we have Stull Cemetery. To those that know the story, Stull Cemetery in Kansas is better known as the doorway to hell. Legend says that the devil himself chose the cemetery as his entrance from the underworld to our own. Now it's said that a tree once stood in the cemetery and an old tombstone there was inscribed with the word witch. The tree was used to hang condemned witches back in the day who were put to death by the locals. The tombstone apparently marks the burial spot of Satan's own child, a creature born deformed and covered in wolf hair. In modern times, the legend has continued with reports of the ground catching fire in random spots. Pope John Paul II was said to divert his private plane around the cemetery because it was so tainted by evil. Now whether or not you believe all of that, there's plenty of videos on YouTube to check out if you're interested, and I find them quite creepy. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Knock Knock Road. This one is for all of you guys watching that get very creeped out by little girl ghosts. I think they're the worst kind of ghost. Strasburg Road near Detroit has a disturbing tale of murder attached to it. Legend says that a little girl was killed on the road in the 1940s by a hit and run driver. Ever since then, people have reported the same story. They stop at a traffic light and see on the side of the road a young girl standing, just standing and staring right into your car. Whether they freeze or then try to speak to her, she slowly walks forward to the car and stares at you with deep set hollow eyes. She scans your face to try and find her killer and get her revenge. I guess you better hope you just don't look like the killer. At number 7 now, we have the Charman. This story goes that in 1948 a wildfire swept across Ojaji, California. The flames consumed a cabin where a man lived with his son. He was burned alive, but the son survived, just barely though. When the authorities arrived, they found a shocking scene. The father had been flayed alive. His skin had been removed from his body and peeled off. His body was just hanging from a nearby tree. The police then searched for the perpetrator. They heard a wheezing sound from a nearby bush, and then suddenly the son just bolted out of it. The overpowering smell of him stunned the officers, and in that moment the boy ran into the trees and then escaped into the hills. In the years since then, many locals have said they've seen the Charman in the woods, horribly disfigured by his burns and tormented by his past. He's said to creep up on the tents of innocent campers in the hills, waiting for them to fall asleep. Coming at number 6 now, we have Hell's Gate Bridge. This one comes from Oxford, Alabama. The story goes that in the 1950s, a young couple crashed their car off the side of this bridge and drowned. Now, some locals believe you cross the bridge at your own peril. One story is that if you drive your car out to the middle of the bridge and then turn off all the lights, the couple will appear in your car just sitting behind you. When you turn around, they'll be gone, leaving a wet seat behind. The other story is that if you drive over the bridge and then look over your shoulder about halfway through, the scenery behind you turns into a portal to hell, just spouting fire and flames. Now whether or not you believe all of this, it's enough for some people to just look for a different way to cross the river. Moving on to number 5 now, we have 100 Steps Cemetery. This is located in the town of Brazil in Indiana. Interesting name for a town, and the cemetery is even more interesting. It's been used for at least 150 years, and in that time it's gained quite a sinister reputation for a ghostly undertaker. The story goes that as you walk up the many steps to the top of the cemetery, you must count each and every step. When you reach the top, you must turn towards the open field, and then the ghost of the cemetery's first undertaker will appear. Without saying anything, he will then reveal your own death to you in a vision. Straight away you must proceed back down the steps and count each one again. If the number is different to the one that you counted on the way up, the vision was true. An added bonus is that if anyone tries to cheat and climb up or down without using the steps, a ghostly hand will push them to the ground, leaving a red imprint on their back for days as a mark of the devil. Definitely not a place to go for just a Sunday walk then. Next up at number 4 now, we have the Goat Man of Pope Lick. I love my job because I get to say sentences like that. This is an old Kentucky urban legend about a hideous being who roams the woods across that state. Those who have seen him describe the Goat Man as having dark fur, pale skin, goat legs and twisted horns. Some people say he was an escaped circus freak, others say he was a farmer who tortured goats for Satan. Satan then repaid him by turning him into into a tortured goat himself. The goat man is said to hide under the rusty bridge that crosses Pope Lick Creek in Louisville. Legend says he lures people onto the train tracks there and then takes pleasure in them being hit by oncoming trains. Please don't go looking for this one though, guys. In 2016, a woman actually fell to her death from the bridge while looking for the goat man. At number 3 now, we have Slaughterhouse Canyon. With a name like that, you know it's not going to be a pretty story. During the 1800s gold rush, a family lived in the canyon there in a little wooden shack. Every day was the same. The husband would set off into the mountains to search for gold and food for his family. Then one day he just didn't come back, presumably injured or killed by animals, the mountain, or even other humans. His wife waited for her husband for weeks until the whole family began to starve. Driven mad with the hunger and her children's cries, she put on her wedding dress, picked up a knife and murdered her children, throwing them into the river and then weeping until starvation killed her too. Legend says that if you visit the canyon today, you can still hear the mother's painful cries. Alright, next up at number 2 now, we have the Black Angel. This statue looks very creepy as it is. An old, worn, corroded angel staring down over Oakland Cemetery in Iowa City. Her sinister appearance has helped spawn a number of different legends around her. One of them says that a pregnant woman should never walk under her lest they want to lose their unborn child. Another says that if you kiss or perhaps even just touch the statue, you'll be dead within 6 months. This is the kind of story that scares everyone off. Whether or not you believe in curses, it's just not even worth thinking about. And finally, number 1 now, we have Cropsey. Many New Yorkers know the story of Cropsey, the boogeyman of Staten Island. Legend says that he was an escaped patient from a mental asylum who went on a murderous rampage. He had a hook for a hand, which he would then use to drag children back to the abandoned ruins of Seaview Hospital. Pretty creepy stuff, but here's where it gets really scary. Many parents would tell this story to their kids to scare them into being cautious about strangers, even if they didn't really believe the story themselves. But then in the 1970s, a real killer called Andre Rand really did start hunting children in a very similar way. Was he using the Cropsey legend as cover? Either way, people now take the legend a lot more seriously.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Wendigo. The Wendigo is something that we like to talk about a lot on Life's Biggest Questions. The Wendigo is a lesson that cannibalism is never gonna end well. The legend of the Wendigo comes from the Algonquin people, which is actually relatively near to where I am here in Toronto. I've actually been to Algonquin National Park and I was scared of bears the first time I went, but the next time I will be aware of the Wendigo. The story of the Wendigo goes that once he was a lost hunter that during a particular harsh winter, and trust me they do get very cold here in Canada, got really hungry. He couldn't find anything to hunt, he couldn't find anything to eat. This continued for days, for months. His hunger became so intense that he turned to cannibalism. After eating human flesh, he became a crazed monster and continued to roam in search of his next fleshy meal. Now the Wendigo, who is 15 feet tall, looks a little like this. Ooh. The Wendigo is said to roam free in the icy plains of Canada and the northern states of the USA like Minnesota, Illinois and upstate New York. The legend has legs too, literally. There have been several spates of Wendigo sightings over the past 150 or so years, most notably when a number of people from the Algonquin went missing in the 20th century. The Wendigo was to blame. The Wendigo is said to lure you away from civilization to icier plains and will then eat you alive. Hard no from me to Mr. Wendigo. Stay away. Do you want to meet the Native American Voldemort? Coming in at number 9, we have the Legend of Two-Face. This is a morality lesson and a scary urban legend at the very same time. The Legend of Two-Face, often called Sharp Elbows or Hester Voto Kio, is about not giving attention to bad things. The story is most popular among the Sioux people, and incantations can be found across a lot of First Nations groups. The story goes that the two-faced creature is a bit of an attention hog, to put it lightly. They are a nasty presence that wants you to look at them. They will do anything to get your attention, but be warned, if you give in, if you look at it, if you give it the attention it craves, it will cut you. Actually, though, it will cut you. One legend is often told about a heavily pregnant Sioux woman. She heard a voice behind her and intuition told her that she shouldn't look around. She was right. The strange voice tried even harder to get her to look, but still she did not. Later, she told her husband, and he was glad. He said that the voice had come from a malevolent creature that would appear to her 4 times. She must must ignore it each and every time. If she successfully ignored it 4 times, it would leave her alone forever. Now it did appear twice more, and twice she successfully ignored it, but on the 4th time, things didn't go well. The 4th time came and she decided to have a peek at the creature. Curiosity got the better of her and she peered through a crack when she thought it was turned away. But what did she see? A ghoulish being with 2 faces and razor-sharp elbows. Its other face turned to look at her directly. It lurched out and cut her to shreds. Lesson being, never give in to negative voices no matter how hard they shout. They will destroy you. Coming in at number 8, we have skinwalkers. In Navajo culture, the legend of skinwalkers is enduring. In fact, the legend is so widely perpetuated that a lot of people outside of the Native American cultures are very scared of them too. Skinwalkers are said to be witches who ascend to their superhuman powers by sacrificing/murdering a close family member. Honestly, how awful. These skinwalkers can then take the form of an animal of their choosing, but they most commonly appear as wolves, owls, coyotes, foxes, and even crows. These witches are said to be extremely dangerous, and you do not want to encounter one for fear of invoking their wrath. What will their wrath do? Straight up murder once again. These skinwalkers are said to be most commonly found stalking deserts in California like Death Valley, the Mojave National Reserve, and Joshua Tree, so watch out. From skinwalkers to Skinwalker Ranch up next at number 7. Some weird things have been happening at the so-called Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. Native Americans in the area truly believe that the area is plagued and cursed by evil spirits, and well, they might actually be right. The ranch became notorious in the media when the Sherman family spoke out about their experience living there in the 1990s. Their stories involved strange lights, ghostly apparitions, and the tale of an invincible wolf that I found particularly interesting. It seems that the Sherman family came across what seemed like a friendly wolf. So friendly, it approached them from time to time. Sadly though, the wolf could not be trusted. It killed a number of their cattle, which are expensive to come by. Now this prompted the head of the Sherman family to shoot it with a .375 Magnum. Nothing. It was struck again. Nothing. The wolf was shot several times more, but it simply walked away. Was this an encounter with a real-life skinwalker? Maybe. Coming in at number 6, we have stick people. Beware the stick people. While they may seem like cheeky pests, they're actually pretty malicious when threatened. The stick people are a legend from the Salish who live in British Columbia. They believe that in the woods there are a tribe of mystical people, stick people. They're a lot like other native tribes, but they're very elusive and they have mystical powers. They communicate by using bird and animal sounds. In the woods, it is said that they will disorientate wanderers with mind control powers. Tricksters, sure. The stick people are said to enter villages at night and mess with tribes, stealing their nets, eating their food, or simply just pulling down men's clothing. Classic. However, you never want to encounter a stick person face to face. This is why young First Nations children are warned never to enter forests alone. If you come across a stick person, they will feel very threatened, and the next time they enter a settlement, they will do more than steal food. They will actually steal children. They'll take the children as punishment and raise them as slaves. Coming into number 5, we have ghost sickness. In Native American culture, it is possible for a person to fall ill with something called ghost sickness. Navajo legend has it that ghost sickness can strike if a deceased person is not buried with the right rituals. If that is the case, the spirit of the deceased can become disruptive and make a living person ill. With ghost sickness, the sufferer will start having terrible dreams about the person who's died. They will become obsessed with their death. They will feel depressed and also physically weak. They may also start to hear voices. According to legend, the only way to recover from ghost sickness is to undergo a ritual performed by a religious leader, and often make adjustments to the burial of the dead to satisfy them. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the cause of ghost sickness. Up next at number 4, we have the chindi. So the chindi is said to be bad energy left over from a person who has died. The chindi is produced when a person takes their last breath. Actually, a lot of First Nations people believe it is much better for people to die out in the open, as it leaves more space for the chindi to disperse. Dying inside a house practically dooms that building to being haunted forever. ever. The Navajo are so wary of invoking Chindi that will actually get rid of a deceased person's possessions. Even saying a deceased person's name is a certain way to summon their bad energy. Just don't do it. Coming into number 3, we have the Legend of the Dust Devils. Navajo people are watchful and wary of dust. Why? Well, because they're actually spirits interacting with the land in the form of a little whirlwind. Whether it's benevolent or malevolent depends on the direction the dust or dirt is spinning. In Navajo folklore, if you see dust spinning in a clockwise direction, everything's fine. But if it spins counterclockwise, well, you better have your wits about you, as you are in the presence of an evil entity. Giant disembodied heads, anyone? Sure. Coming in at number 2, we have the Legends of the Flying Head. The Flying Head legend is most popular in Iroquois and Wyandot culture. Flying heads are thought to be produced from cannibals or from battles wherein people have physically lost their heads. Flying heads are giant, ravenous beings with neck-length hair. Do you want to see a depiction? I'm kind of here for them. I can imagine myself as like a giant ravenous head sometimes. Some descriptions even have them with bat wings, and they're said to have an insatiable hunger, so insatiable that they're often led to eat people. Nonetheless, no man-made weapon can kill them. The only way to be rid of them is to trick them into eating hot coals. Easier said than done, I think. Finally, coming into number 1, we have the owls. I really like this tale of how owls were created, and it's pretty scary and may make you feel not so great about our murderous feathery friends. As told by the Yakama, the story goes that there was once 5 sisters who lived in a cave. These sisters were no normal humans. In fact, they would eat vile things like frogs, lizards, snakes, and mice, things that other First Nations people simply wouldn't eat. Some even said that they would eat tribes people if they took a disliking to them. Were these 5 sisters the native equivalent of witches? Quite possibly. They seem to be in touch with a lot of bad energy and cause a lot of people a lot of problems. Luckily for the other tribes though, one by one the women died. Finally, everybody breathed a sigh of relief as the final sister drowned. You would think that would have been the end of it, but no. From one of her eyes, it is said that all owls were created. Sure, because owls. Now when you see owls, apparently they are a small part of the evil 5th sister, part of her soul that's always watching and waiting. But for what? Owls. Who knew?
Starting off number 10 now, we have the Black Ghost of the Blue Mountains. If you ever head through Victoria Pass on Australia's Great Western Highway, keep an eye out at night. For more than a century now, truckers have reported seeing the ghost of a child bride called Carolyn Collette. She was beaten to death by her ex-boyfriend John Walsh in 1842 out there in the pass. Now they say her tortured soul haunts those who pass by on a dark, cold night. It's claimed that the colder the night, the better. When black ice covers the road, threatening to spin vehicles down to their doom, everyone is forced to slow down. Once everyone is slow, Caroline is said to approach, ready to seek vengeance for her gruesome death. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Burning Airman. During World War II, an Australian bomber plane crashed on the outskirts of Canberra, killing all 4 on board. It would become known as the Canberra Air Disaster. Years later, people in the area started reporting strange encounters in the woods. They said unearthly lights could be seen near the old crash site. Others heard the droning noise of a plane followed by a loud bang. Then things got weirder. A teenage girl once ran screaming from the forest, saying that she was being followed by a long dead airman. She said he was covered in fire and that he followed her to the edge of the forest. More people began to report the same thing, horrific encounters that left people traumatized. The stories have been enough to turn some people away from the forest forever for fear of seeing this burning airman stalking them through the trees. Moving on to number 8 now, we have Kelly. This is a very creepy one that was shared on Reddit. User Puppy2010 said that they have relatives in the northern beaches area of Australia on the country's east coast. There, locals tell tales of a girl called Kelly who would appear in people's cars near Oxford Falls if they were travelling alone past midnight. She is said to be the spirit of a girl who died in a car crash there in the 1970s and has haunted the road ever since. For me though, the scariest part of the story is that if you don't tell Kelly to get out of the car, she will take control of the car. For those who believe in the tale of Kelly, they worry for the travellers who have never heard this story before and don't know to tell her to get out of the car. Next up at number 7 now we have the Orchard Hills Mafia House. This is a huge white mansion found out in Greater Sydney. You might say it was quite beautiful if not for the scary stories attached to it. For some ghost hunters, no place in Sydney has more spirits than the Orchard Hills Mafia House. Lights are said to just flash off and on even when the building is empty. From the outside, people have seen creepy shadows flickering behind the curtains. Some people even claim that these shadows come outside and approach visitors, chasing them down the driveway with demonic grins on their faces. Why are there so many spirits said to live there? Well, that goes back to the building's name. It's called the Mafia House because it was said to be owned by members of a local mafia group. They were rumoured to routinely execute informants and snitches in one of the upstairs rooms. Between the murderous gangs and the spirits of their victims, many people choose to stay well clear of the big white mansion. Coming in at number 6 now we have the Hawkesbury River Monster. In a lot of these urban legends videos we've discussed creatures that bear a strange resemblance to the Loch Ness Monster. Well, perhaps this is Australia's version. The Hawkesbury River Monster is said to be a snake-like creature with a long neck, a large body and 2 sets of flippers with an eel-like tail. Locals tell fearsome tales of the beast and claim that they have proof to back it up. People point to the huge slide marks that keep appearing on the riverbanks or the crushed and abandoned boats with no owners in sight. Some say this is not a modern phenomena either and that the monster is depicted in the ancient Aboriginal art of that area. Moving on to number 5 now we have the Hands of Goodna Cemetery. Located on the outskirts of Brisbane, Goodna Cemetery doesn't look to be out of the ordinary at first. Those who visit it though do so because they have heard the stories of what goes on there after dark. According to local legend, there is some sort of force in the cemetery. People describe it differently, but one thing they all agree on is that this force does not like visitors. At night people feel invisible hands punching and scratching them. It's not just a light tap either. People say you'd know if the hands touch you. One particularly scary story involves a local man who once tried to flee the cemetery in his car, but the car just wouldn't start. He spent the night huddled in his car trying to ignore the strange noises outside. The next morning he stepped out and found long scratch marks all the way down the side of his car. Something had been trying to get in and get him. Moving on to number 4 now, we have Schneider's Alley. In the early 20th century, Dr. Schneider lived in Clifton Manor with his wife and child. Their lives were quite uneventful until one day when tragedy struck. Both the doctor's wife and child died in an accident. The doctor spiraled into madness. At first it was just his personal life that was affected, but then it began to bleed into his work. He would take his patients to a little log cabin near his house where he performed surgical experiments on them without anesthetic. The house saw him mutilate countless people. The locals say that in the years since then they've seen his disfigured patients wandering the hills around the house and lurking in the alley. At night, distant screams can be heard from those still reliving their operations. Some brave soul visit the house to try and catch their sounds. Next up at number 3 now we have the Satanist Cult. The Kings Park in Perth draws in many visitors during the day, but at night it plays host to all kinds of spooky legends. One of this is the Satanic Cult. It's said that on certain nights a secret group of devil worshippers descend upon the park where they perform strange rituals. Occult symbols are drawn, effigies are burnt, and all kinds of demonic behaviour takes place upon the grassy slopes there. Some even say that human sacrifices happen there. This legend has only been fueled by the reports of local homeless men going missing after they visit the park. People believe that sleeping in the park after dark is inviting yourself to be killed in the name of the demons that the cult worships. Next up at number 2 now we have the Markery Field Station. In the southwest suburb of Sydney lies a train station with a grisly secret. When the last train leaves Markery Field Station and the platform is totally empty, a faint cry can be heard in the breeze. Believers say the station is haunted. For those that find the crying scary to hear, things only get worse. Some say the crying eventually stops and then, after a short pause, it turns to blood-curdling screams of anguish. On some occasions, people even see the ghost itself, a teenage girl roaming the platform with dark blood covering her face. She cries and cries, then screams and screams. For me though, the creepiest part is that sometimes she stares right at you. And finally, number 1 now, we have the Min Min lights. Those who have ventured to Eastern Australia's outback will often return with tales of the Min Min lights. On some nights, burning lights are said to appear in the distance but never get closer. They keep pace alongside the car but never get any nearer, almost as if it was watching you. Some people believe that if you leave your car, the lights will stalk you through the Australian outback. But hey, don't take my word for it. Unlike many of the other ones we've talked about on our list, there has been documented cases of the Min Min lights. You can find footage on YouTube filmed by locals. In 2003, a report suggested that the lights are just a trick of the light and appear under certain conditions. Others believe this only deepens the conspiracy. They say the government is trying to shake people off the trail and not discover the true nature of the Min Min lights.
Coming in at number 10, one McDonald's store is entirely run by robots. Has the AI takeover begun? Good question. The rumour has it that McDonald's are slowly replacing their staff with robots and have started by trialling it at a number of restaurants in the southern states of America. The reasoning behind what are being dubbed as McRobots is that McDonald's doesn't want to pay its staff a living wage and instead would rather invest its money on a robot force that would be cheaper in the long run. It seems that this urban legend can trace its origin back to May 2015 when a fake news article was published on the website News Examiner. Now this website claimed that a store in Phoenix, Arizona had replaced staff with robots. Snopes debunked it, but it hasn't stopped people believing that McRobots are out in full force. Coming in at number 9, McDonald's brainwashes kids. There might actually be something to this. Urban legend has it that McDonald's has some kind of sneaky way of brainwashing kids, and to be honest, it isn't the most unlikely thing. A 1996 survey of American school children found that 96% of them could identify Ronald McDonald. That was 20 years ago. I bet every child could recognize the Golden Arches today. According to Time magazine, in 2013, 40% of parents reported that their child asked to go to McDonald's at least once a week. How are they doing this? Apparently McDonald's are brainwashing kids by very targeted marketing. McDonald's latest way to brainwash kids of America has allegedly been showing them a documentary called 540 Meals. Now this is a movie produced by the fast food giants about a high school teacher losing weight by eating only McDonald's food. Coming in at number 8, we have the story of the McDonald's built on the ancient burial ground. Legend has it that a McDonald's in Rock Rim, Colorado Springs is built on an ancient burial ground. This is some poltergeist stuff right here. People just don't seem to have learned not to build things on ancient burial grounds. Honestly, it's always asking for trouble. This store in question has been haunted by a very angry looking Native American man with a quote-unquote dour face. Apparently the disgruntled ghost turns on taps, jangles keys, and produces phantom screams. Locals say that the area was indeed an old Native American settlement and burial ground, however this is unsupported by any archaeological evidence. Coming in at number 7, it's a classic. Ronald McDonald is a member of the Illuminati. According to some conspiracists, Ronald McDonald started the killer clown craze. A blogger called Bruce started the rumor, saying that the clown is a subtle representation of Satan. Now this was apparently designed by Illuminati McDonald's chiefs in order to appeal to children in order to make them more susceptible to notions of Satan and hell. According to Reddit user 911bodysnatchers322, there is some kind of strange weight to this rumor, this new urban legend. They say that clowns are used as a trigger in some kind of Illuminati mind control technique. Coming in at number 6, very worrying, McDonald's gets you pregnant. This is a weird urban legend for sure, but some people out there think that eating McDonald's fries after sex can get you pregnant. Apparently a whole host of women trying to conceive think that eating a large portions of McDonald's fries after sex will absolutely do the trick. Founder of UK website Channel Mum, Siobhan Freegard, spoke about the myth, saying that it's very popular among the surrogate community in the UK as a pregnancy and conception hack. She said, "We genuinely don't know why it has caught on and why it has to be McDonald's, not any other fast food chain. But is it actually false?" Laura Dixon from Essex had been trying to get pregnant for 10 years. Now she puts the conception of her triplets down to McDonald's. Laura was previously a vegetarian, but as she was struggling to conceive even with IVF, doctors advised that she gets more protein. She then regularly started hitting up McDonald's stores and eventually she did fall pregnant, craving the fast food more than ever. She put on 75 pounds in 35 weeks by eating 6 McDonald's meals a day. She then birthed her 3 kids, Mason, Max and Mia, in 2012. Coming in at number 5, McDonald's burgers are made of earthworms. Now this rumour dates back to 1978 when people started referring to McDonald's burgers as McSquirmies. The rumour actually started about fast food chain Wendy's, and then they were perpetuated by false reports that actually there were undercover investigative journalists involved and they discovered that there were worms in the beef patties. In classic urban legend style, the rumours were then switched to focus on the biggest fast food chain in the biz. The rumour actually became so strong that sales were affected in the American South. McDonald's responded by denying that there were any protein additives, although they failed to mention the word worm. Getting even crazier at number 4, apparently there are cow eyeballs in McDonald's burgers. Since Wormgate in the 1970s, McDonald's has been quite vigilant on reiterating that they only use 100% beef, but are they cheating with the definition here? Sure, the burgers might be 100% cow, but are they using more of the cow than customers are comfortable with? One scary and very popular McDonald's urban legend is that fast food giants use eyeballs in their burgers. This doesn't seem to be in line with the United States Department of Agriculture though. They say that all animal byproducts and fillers need to be clearly labelled, so there isn't really any way that McDonald's could be doing this without labelling it. Coming into number 3, we have the urban legend of the haunted McDonald's bench. Legend has it that there is a haunted Ronald McDonald bench in Cuernavaca in Morelos, Mexico. It seems that one evening, 2 drunk guys were out and about and wanted to get some food after some solid drinking hours. It's a tale as old as time, right? Get drunk, need a burger. These guys got their burgers and they sat on a bench outside the restaurant munching away. When they finished, one of them thought that, you know what, they'd call it a night. One guy turned to the other and said, "I'm tired." Now it seems that this was the moment that the inanimate Ronald McDonald on the bench decided to pipe up. He turned his head, smiled and said, "I'm tired too." One of the guys had a heart attack because he was so scared and shocked. His friend rushed to get help. Now the guy survived but was in hospital for a long time. Apparently the whole thing was caught on CCTV, but McDonald's destroyed the footage and hushed up the incident. I for one do remain pretty skeptical. Coming in at number 2, there are knives and heroin needles in the ball pits. Some McDonald's restaurants come complete with a play area, and who doesn't love a good jungle gym, especially one with ball pits? The only thing is, ball pits are actually kind of gross if you think about them. Have you ever watched a kid play in a ball pit? Those little sods, like, they lick the balls, they wipe their snotty hands on them, it's all kinds of gross. Although another kid's saliva isn't the scariest thing found in a McDonald's ball pit, that is if the urban legends are to be believed. It seems a child died in 1994 after playing in a ball pool. The urban legend has it that 3-year-old Kevin Archer was pricked by a hypodermic needle containing heroin as he dived in the sea of balls. A story circulated on the internet in 1999, apparently written by Kevin's mother, who said that her son died of a drug overdose. After his death, police allegedly removed all of the balls from the pit, and what they found was disgraceful. Apparently the balls only get taken out and cleaned once a month, and in this pit in Sugar Land, Texas, authorities found rotten food, feces, diapers, half-eaten candy, knives and needles. Kevin's mother signed off the message by saying that readers should check the October 10th, 94 issue of the Houston Chronicle, although of course there is no such mention of the death. Finally, at number 1, this is the scariest McDonald urban legends that I have ever heard of. Coming into number 1, there is a mutant meat lab out there. In the early 2000s, rumours started flying around the internet that McDonald's meat was made from genetically modified cow mutants grown specifically to be burger food in a secret lab somewhere. The original source seems to be from a fake email uncovered in Brazil. The email said that people who had seen the creatures reared in the lab were absolutely horrified. They said that the mutants had no limbs, bones, horns or fur, that their heads were the size of baseballs, and that they were fed through tubes directly into their stomachs. The email also stated that those who eat this meat are at risk of catching a disease akin to AIDS and Alzheimer's. What on earth?
Starting off at number 10 now, we have duppies. This is a word of Jamaican origin meaning ghost or spirit. They are generally regarded as evil, coming out to haunt people at night. They've been seen by many Jamaicans and come in a number of different forms, some of which we will be discussing discussing later. A duppy is regarded as a powerful being that can visit at any time of the day or night and cause havoc or pain to invoke maximum fear in their chosen victim. They are often the soul of a dead person that can take on human or animal form and sometimes even appear as a bull-like creature bound in chains. Many people fear that when their enemies die, they will come back to haunt them as a duppy. Now, contrary to popular belief, this works alongside the belief in heaven. You see, it's thought that after death, the soul of a person deemed as good goes to heaven to be judged by God. Before that, the spirit remains attached to the body for 3 days. Now, this is the time when the spirits have a chance to escape and become a duppy. Duppy sightings often describe them violently attacking people, sometimes even with rocks, other times by violently shaking them. We have a specific type of duppy now at number 9 with the rolling calf. Some say this is the worst and most feared of all the spirits. The rolling part of the name literally means roaming. It's a shapeshifter that can appear in a number of different forms. It's said that the most common are that of a hornless goat, black or white or spotted. One of its front legs is human, the other is that of a horse, and the 2 back legs are goats. Its tail curls over its back, its eyes are red and glow like blazing fires, its nose spits hot flames. There's a collar on its neck with a chain that rattles and drags on the ground, warning people of its approach. A rolling calf is created from the soul of an especially evil person. Murderers will almost always return as a rolling calf. They seek to continue their evil ways by blowing bad breath on people, which can cause all kinds of calamity and suffering, even death. They are said to be found in bamboo and cottonwood as well as caves and abandoned houses. Even so, they have been known to turn up pretty much wherever they please, bringing fear into the hearts of those in the area. Next up at number 8 now, we have Old Haig. This is said to be a witch-like creature who is particularly gross in my opinion. She's said to shed her skin and fly by night, taking on the form of an evil owl. Her weapon of choice to kill humans is to suck out their breath when they are sleeping. Using this method, she is said to be especially dangerous to babies. However, her need to shed skin, while disgusting, is also the source of her weakness. They say you need to put salt and pepper on the shed skin that you find. When she then tries to put the skin back on to gain her protective powers, she won't be able to because it will burn too much. As the layers keep shedding, she becomes weaker and vulnerable to attack. Some versions of the story state that the person who finds the skin of Old Haig must say the words "salt and pepper for your mama" while pouring the mixture onto the skin. Others say that laying an open Bible beside a baby crib to protect them from the witch will also work. Creepy stuff. Next up at number 7 now, we have River Mama. This is essentially a mermaid. Jamaican legend says that she inhabits the country's rivers and that all the fish are her children. Some people say she climbs out of the river to sit on the rocks and comb her long black hair. She may be a sight to see, but locals say you should never look at her, even for a moment. There's no telling what she will do if you try. Some say a single peek will cause you to fall into a deep trance. At that point, she'll grab you by the heels and drag you right under the river. Now, of course, with a creature like this on the loose, you may think people would want to put an end to the creature, but that's not a good idea. They say if you try to catch River Mama, all the fish in that river will disappear and the river will run dry. The best course of action is to just hope you don't cross paths with her. Now we have Annie Palmer. Many in Jamaica have heard of this famous ghost. She's also known as the White Witch. She's said to haunt the grounds of Rose Hall Plantation near Montego Bay. The story goes she was born in Haiti to an English mother and Irish father, spending most of her life there. When her parents died of yellow fever, she was adopted by a nanny who taught her witchcraft and voodoo. Annie moved to Jamaica and married John Palmer, owner of the Rose Hall Plantation. Corrupted by the witchcraft she had been taught, Annie murdered her husband and also her next 2 husbands, while also killing a number of different male plantation slaves. Her killing spree was eventually brought to an end when she herself was murdered by a slave named Taku. She had met her match in him, as he was also trained in the ways of witchcraft. Annie was buried in a tomb on the grounds. Local legend says that her tomb was supposed to be sealed with a voodoo ritual that would have kept her spirit in prison there forever. However, the ritual was never completed, leaving her ghost to roam free. Many have reported seeing her ghost riding her horse around the plantation or just stood on the balcony overlooking the grounds. Next up at number 5 now, we have the cotton tree. Many Caribbean countries have spiritual stories linked to cotton trees. In Jamaica, some believe that cotton trees are the resting place of spirits of the dead, particularly its roots and branches. Many of the duppies we talked about earlier in the video are said to call a cotton tree their home. The belief is so prevalent that some people have refused to cut down silk cotton trees for fear of releasing the spirits inside. There was even a case in Guyana of a highway being split into 2 lanes during construction in order to avoid a sacred cotton tree there and not release its spirits. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the legend of Lover's Leap. In the 18th century there were 2 slave lovers named Mizzy and Tunky. Legend says that the slave master there took quite a liking to the girl. He intended to break them up and so showered her with gifts. In a bid to have her for himself, he arranged for her lover to be sold off to another estate. However, their love was too strong. One night they fled from the plantation. Eventually though, their captors caught up with them and chased them to the edge of a large cliff. After a few moments they made up their minds and knew what they wanted to do. Rather than face being caught and separated again, the pair chose to end their lives by jumping off the cliff together. Forevermore, that spot was named Lover's Leap in dedication to their love in the face of such evil. Local legend says that spirits still live there, bound to each other. Some say that if you stand on the cliff and look up on a clear night, you may catch a glimpse of 2 falling stars tumbling side by side. Next up at number 3 now, we have the 3-legged horse and the whooping boy. This one's kind of a combo, don't say I never treat you guys. The 3-legged horse is another kind of duppy that many Jamaicans know about. As you can probably gather from the name, this spirit takes the shape of a horse with 3 legs. However, despite missing a leg, it can run faster than any horse you've ever seen. It kills its victims by blowing hot air on them. It roams the Jamaican countryside and can be seen by moonlight, striking fear into the hearts of witnesses. However, there are some ways to fight it and not be killed. Firstly, it will never attack you in the dark. It needs moonlight or artificial light to be able to attack you, so the darker the better. If you do find yourself being attacked in the light though, trees are your friend. It's said that the 3-legged horse cannot attack you if you climb up a tree. Only one being in the whole world can ride the 3-legged horse, and that is the whooping boy. He's another duppy which takes the form of a boy with long hair and red eyes. He also kills by breathing hot air on people. He gets his name from the wild whooping sounds that he cries out while wandering at night or riding the 3-legged horse. They're quite scary alone, terrifying when together. Moving on to number 2 now, we have the Flatbridge Horror. Accidents happen, but when they keep happening in the same spot, it does raise some eyebrows. Flatbridge is one of those places. Over the years it's seen a number of people die, far more than there should be. Some put it down to the bridge's poor condition, but there are many who blame the duppies. They say the spirits of those who died constructing the bridge now haunt it. They're the ones to blame for all the accidents and vehicles pulled into the river. They say when the water turns the colour of a green lizard, the duppies are going to pull someone in soon. Others say it's the work of mermaids who live in a bottomless hole just below the bridge. Many believe that the mermaids are the reason each attempt to build a ridge along the bridge has failed. However, there is some good to their story. Legend says that they can point the way to a gold table that lies in the water under the bridge. It surfaces on the hottest days at noon in the river. Perhaps the most recent story to come from this bridge happened in 2016 when a car plunged off it, killing 6 people. Shane Harris was a 19-year-old survivor. He said that when the car was in the water, he couldn't find a way out. Then he saw a bright white light, brighter than anything he'd seen before, and out of that light came a hand. He grabbed the hand, and when he opened his eyes, he was on the surface. He said that just before the crash, they were talking about the legendary tale of the mermaid. And finally, number 1 now, we have the man from the picture. This story was posted by a woman to a forum, and it goes like this. One hot summer night, she was cooling off by the window that had a side passage to her house which was secured by a metal grill. Nobody should be able to get in. She went to bed as normal, but then suddenly woke up from her sleep. She looked out of that same window, and there, standing, was a tall, elderly man. He had a stern look on his face. His hands were folded behind his back. He looked very real, but also kind of not at the same time. She stared at him for what felt like forever, until eventually she threw her sheet over her head and lay there trembling until finally falling asleep. She woke up the next morning and rushed to tell her grandmother what she had seen. She hadn't even finished before her grandmother said, "Oh, you saw Jack last night?" she asked. who Jack was. The grandmother went to look for something. She came back a few minutes later with a picture in her hand. In the picture, there was a tall man who looked exactly the same as the man she had seen the night before at the window. She broke down in tears. It was her first ghost experience. She later found out that Jack was actually her great-grandmother's father, and he was buried near the house on some family land. She said she never forgot the image of the man she woke up to standing at the window. Starting off number 10 now, we have Cropsey. Some of you guys may have heard me talk about this one before. It's the story of the boogeyman of Staten Island. He was rumored to be a homicidal maniac who escaped from a mental asylum. He would hunt for children and drag them back to the ruins of a hospital where he lived. Witnesses always said that he had a hook for a hand. These stories were meant to scare kids, perhaps even told to them by their own parents who wanted them to be more wary of strangers. Then, in 1972, the boogeyman became real. News broke of a real-life corpsey man called Andre Rand. He was a former janitor at the local school for mentally disabled children. Rand was arrested in connection with the disappearance of Jennifer Schweiger, a 12-year-old girl with Down syndrome. He lost his job over the case and moved into the now abandoned school that he used to work in. He was eventually convicted of murder, and police connected him to the disappearance of 4 other children. No bodies were ever recovered. Moving on now to number 9, guys, we have the Bunny Man. I talked about this legend in my West Virginia video, if you remember. The story goes that in 1904 a mental asylum closed down. While transferring inmates to a new facility, one of the buses crashed. Most of the people in it were killed or captured trying to escape, but one actually did escape, known as the Bunny Man. He would then roam the land hunting rabbits and then leaving their half-eaten carcasses for the locals to find. Sometimes they will be hanging from a tree or a bridge. Although there are parts of the story that just don't add up, something strange happened in 1970. A couple driving their car at night had an axe thrown through their window by a man in a bunny suit. 2 weeks later, another man found an axe-wielding guy in a bunny suit chopping wood nearby who was gone by the time police arrived. Are these linked together somehow? Is there more truth to this than meets the eye? Moving on now to number 8, we have the body under the bed. Ever since hotels and motels have become a common part of society, people have swapped stories about guests who discovered that the mattress they were sleeping on was either above or even stuffed with the body of a murder victim. A grisly tale for sure, but one that was confined to the realms of myths and legend. Then, in 1999, a case in Colorado occurred involving a couple who slept on a mattress containing a body. The police kept the details of that close to their chest, but in 2010 a huge story broke when guests at a Memphis motel discovered they had been sleeping above the body of Sony Millbrook, a missing person at the time. Her boyfriend, Lakeith Moody, was convicted of the crime. Many people were horrified and vowed to give their hotel beds a closer inspection next time. Next up at number 7 now, guys, we have the Maine Robber. That's M-A-I-N-E. The state. For many years, visitors to Maine's North Pond have reported that something strange was going on there. Time after time, people reported that things were going missing. Not just one person, one time, many people, many times. Batteries and food would vanish from cabins, while flashlights just disappeared from camping tents. People thought either the earth itself was swallowing it all up, or there was a thief at work. It turns out they were right about that. In 2013, a game warden discovered Christopher Knight living alone in the woods. For 27 years, this man had been there watching hikers, canoeists and other visitors to the area. When taken in for questioning, Knight admitted that he was responsible for around 40 robberies a year. I mean, stealing batteries is one thing, but I feel like if you were being watched all those years and then you were proven right about it, that would be even creepier. At the number 6 spot now, we have the Falling Lawyer. Now, I've lived in Toronto for quite a few years now, and I've personally heard this story floating around the place, but I never thought it was actually true until now. They say that years ago there was a lawyer who loved to show off how strong his office windows were in his building that overlooked the city. Every time someone came to visit, he would take a long run up, jump, and hurl himself right into the window. Sure enough, the window would remain intact, although we'll never know if this actually impressed his visitors. Well, this lawyer was real, and his name was Gary Hoy. He was a senior partner at his firm with an office on the 24th floor. On July 9th, 1993, some law students came to visit. He took his usual leap at the window, but this time, after years of it being weakened, it smashed. Gary plummeted to his death, and the improbable story became somewhat of a local legend. Next up at number 5 now, we have the Puebla's secrets. For many years, longer than people can even remember, the people of Puebla in Mexico have talked about the tunnels. Secret tunnels that were built under their city by the Spanish conquistadors in the 1500s. It's been almost half a millennia since then, and the stories became legend. People looked for them, but they found nothing. The tunnels became a myth, something to scare the kids into believing there was a dark maze of caverns beneath them. In 2014, construction workers were in the middle of an urban remodeling project when they stumbled upon an old tunnel. Surely the legends weren't true. The Puebla History Center took over the site to investigate, and yes, it was the fabled tunnels people had spoken about. They determined the tunnels were built in 1531, right after the city was founded. Members of the Catholic Church supposedly used the tunnels to transport treasure and other property in and out of the city without people knowing about it. Part of the tunnels are now open to the public, giving you the chance to walk through the dark halls of an urban legend that came true. Coming in number 4 now, guys, we have the alligators. I definitely talked about this one in our New York urban legends video. Many years ago in New York, people would say that there were alligators in the sewers below the city. They said a young boy once flushed his pet alligator down the toilet. Years later, he reached into the sewer grate to retrieve a lost baseball. At that moment, a fully grown alligator leapt up from below and ripped his arm clean off, the same alligator he had flushed away. Many people dismissed the whole story. Alligators, New York, crazy. However, in 1959, Teddy May, the commissioner of New York during the time of these rumors, wrote about the alligators in his tell-all book. He said that he and his inspectors did find alligators in the New York sewers in 1935. They were up to 2 feet in size. It took 2 years for them to clear them all out, more than enough time for the facts to get blurred with fiction. Moving on to number 3 now, we have the Dog Boy. For many people in Arkansas, they know the stories of the Dog Boy. Kids swap tales of a werewolf-like man who roams around the town of Quitman. Some even say they've seen him. Many of them might not know that the story is somewhat based in real life. Gerald Bettis was born in Quitman in 1954. By the time he was a young boy, the neighbors were already calling him evil. They said he liked to capture stray animals and torture them in twisted experiments. As he got older, he turned on his parents, tormenting them until, at the age of 27, his dead father was found in his home. The newspapers said it was illness, but others said it was murder. Beres then kept his mother in the house until she was finally taken away and placed in protective custody. His mother testified against him, and he was given life in prison, where he died a few years later. They say that his spirit still haunts that house and that he's often seen roaming the area as a ghost on all fours with shaggy hair like a dog. At the number 2 spot now, guys, we have Charlie No Face. Some of you may have heard me talk about this one in my Pennsylvanian video. Charlie No Face is the story of a boy called Charlie who once got electrocuted while climbing on an electric pole to try and see into a bird's nest. He was horrifically disfigured. His face had practically melted off. Eyes, nose, mouth, one of his ears and one of his arms all completely gone. It also turned his skin a sickly green. Somehow he survived and lived out his life in a small town, rarely showing his face to the other locals. People would share the story of Charlie No Face, but because nobody saw him, the story became nothing more than an urban legend. But it wasn't. The story was actually true, all except for the name. Charlie's real name was Raymond Robinson. He was friendly to people whenever they saw him, and he wasn't responsible for the many hauntings that became associated with the legend. And finally, number 1 now, we have Polybius. You may remember this from my video game Urban Legends video. Polybius was the name of an arcade game which kids in Portland got addicted to in 1981. Whenever they were forced off it, they felt nauseous, stressed, or even had seizures. Some people noticed the game was being serviced a lot more than usual. Instead of once a month, Polybius was being checked by men in black suits every single week. They would copy its hard drive, leave all of the money, and then be gone until the next week. People believed they were from the CIA, and that Polybius was all part of a mind control program that sent subliminal messages to its players. While a lot of this is debatable, there really was a kid who got sick during an arcade marathon contest in Portland in 1981. A few days after that, federal agents really did seize a load of arcade cabinets. They said it was all part part of a major gambling bust. This is where people tend to differ in opinion. Some say that the story of Polybius was inspired by the events, others say the events are proof of the story. Coming at number 10, we have the Super Mario Shadow People. Super Mario Galaxy is a game known for pure fun, bright colours, familiar faces, and a whole lot of bouncing around on little stars. It's also gained a reputation for featuring the Shadow People. At the beginning of the Shiverburn Galaxy level, strange shadowy figures can be seen at the top of the cliff in the background. Now at first, many people brushed this off as just people's imagination running wild. Then someone took the initiative to look through the game files. They found that the name of the background image is called Hell Valley Sky Tree. Who said anything about Hell Valley? The internet exploded with conversation about this. Who were these shadow people, always watching you, even though you can never get any closer to them, and nobody even mentions them in the game? Some people have tried to explain these away as just trees, but others say, I ain't seen no tree that looks like that. It's one of those things where if Nintendo actually acknowledged it, it may not be so creepy, but the fact that they have still refused to means people are left wondering who the shadow people of Hell Valley are. Next up at number 9 now, we have the Hall of Tortured Souls. This is a well-known Easter egg that was hidden in the coding of Windows 95. Deep in the software there is a hidden game there. Nobody knows who found it first, but this is how you find it. To enter the game, go to Microsoft Excel 95, open a new blank Excel worksheet, go down to the 95th row and select the whole row. Tab over to column B, go to Help/About, tap and hold Ctrl Alt and Shift, and then click the tech support button. Then the game will appear. It's called Hall of Tortured Souls. Players use their arrow keys to move in 8 different directions. Eventually you will find a staircase. The walls are surrounded by text with the names of the creators on. On the next level there is a small room with red walls. Again, the names of the creators will flash up on the screen. Go down a bit and enter the room where you were before. Type the magic word XLKFA. Another room will open where you have to follow zigzagging black paths. Eventually you will find the end of the game. A picture of the developers of the software. The whole thing is a little bit unnerving. Even though the game has been discovered and completed at this point, many people are creeped out by its name. Hall of Tortured Souls. They feel there may be something much darker hidden deeper in that game. Maybe one of you guys will be the one to find it. Next up at number 8 now, we have Polybius. Some call this the most dangerous video game ever made. The story begins in Portland, 1981. A local arcade hall was attracting more visitors than normal. All the games were busy, but only one had a long line of people wanting to play it. A new game, Polybius. The players couldn't stop playing it. When they were finally forced off it, they began to act strangely. They said they felt nauseous, stressed, and had terrifying nightmares. Others had seizures. There were even reports of all the madness forcing people to suicide. The one common thing that everyone felt was that they were unable to control their own thoughts anymore. Then people began to notice that the game was being serviced a lot more than usual. Other games might get checked by technicians maybe once a month, but Polybius was being checked every single week. Men in black suits would come, record its data, and then leave. They would never take the coins and seemed to have no interest in the money it had made. After a while of this, the mysterious arcade game vanished as soon as it arrived, taken by the very same men in suits. People believed that the men and the machine were from the CIA, that it was all part of a mind control program, an experiment that was sending subliminal messages to players. So, was there any truth to this? Well, that's the faith you kind of need to put into the story. The story has been repeated and spread for almost 40 years now, but it's very hard to verify as the arcade machine and the men who monitored it disappeared without a trace. If this program has continued to modern times though, perhaps they've just got better at hiding their experiments in your games. Next up at number 7 now, we have the ghost of GTA 5. It's been almost 5 years now since GTA 5 was released, and by now it seems that players really have discovered every last secret and Easter egg the game has been hiding. One of them does stick out as a lot more creepy than others though. Near the peak of Mount Gordo there is a flat rock on the ground which bears the word Jock written in blood. Between 11 PM and midnight in the game, the player can see the ghost of a woman appear near the rock with long black hair and wearing a white dress. She is said to be the ghost of Jolene Cranley Evans. She was the wife of Jock Cranley, a famous stunt double in the game from years ago. Story goes that she didn't want to move from their home near Mount Gordo to the city of Los Santos so that Jock could pursue his stunt double career. He took her up for a walk on the mountain and pushed her off, where she fell to her death. He was arrested but released due to lack of evidence. Now she haunts the mountain in the game. If players go to a nearby campsite, they can hear screaming or an incomprehensible whispering sound which, if played backwards, says, "Let's see your shot." The final creepy thing is that if you try to approach this ghost, she will vanish straight into the night. Next up at number 6 now we have Luigi is dead. There's something you Luigi fans never want to hear. However, there are clues in some Super Mario games that he really is. In Luigi's mansion, during the blackout that happens after the boss battle of Area 3, Luigi journeys to the telephone room and answers 2 calls. During these calls, while Luigi is holding the phone to his ear, the player must wait until there is a lightning flash, and then they will see that Luigi's shadow has been twisted into a way that looks like he's been hanged. Now, some people say this shadow is the metaphorical shadow of a much darker game that was actually meant to be released, or that they just forgot to take this part out. Others say this was intentional and a nod from the developers to the fact that Luigi has been dead for many years now. He killed himself after always having to live in the shadow of his more popular and famous brother. Nintendo says it's just a glitch, but others say that's just a cover-up, and as much as Nintendo fans don't want to hear it, Luigi is dead. Next up at number 5 now we have Lavender Town. Those of you that have played the original Pokemon games on Game Boy may already be familiar with how creepy the Lavender Town theme music is. I mean, the whole town is based around dead Pokemon. That's kind of the point, but there is a story that goes way deeper and darker than you know. Following the release of Pokemon Red and Green, there were a number of reported child suicides in Japan. When players got to Lavender Town, the music had a strange effect on them. People said the song was created with a hidden code in it that would drive children to kill themselves. The subliminal code used very high frequencies, ones that only young kids can hear and not adults. This became known as Lavender Town Syndrome. Supposedly, 200 children committed suicide in Japan because of this, and many more developed illnesses and afflictions. The children who committed suicide usually did so by hanging or jumping from heights. Those who did not succumb to the suicidal pull still complained of severe headaches after listening to the Lavender Town theme. According to the legend, the developers in Japan were forced to fix the song's frequency to be at a lower frequency before international release. That's the safe version that you and I and many other people have heard. They say the real version can still be found out there, waiting for its next victim. Moving on to number 4 now, we have the Xbox Voices. When the Xbox was first released in 2001, it was praised for its power and cutting edge technology. Microsoft didn't really want to waste all of that when the console wasn't being used, and so they added some ambient noises which played while it was idle. These noises started out normal at first, but quickly got very strange. People said it kind of sounded like the console was channeling voices from the dead. Naturally, people wanted answers from Microsoft. Was this some sort of subliminal messaging? Was it supposed to influence dreams when players fall asleep with the console on in their room? Well, the company said it wasn't actually even their own music. It was public domain audio from NASA transmissions from the Apollo missions. For those of you that don't know, these were the missions that went to the moon. If you think you can handle it, I'd recommend listening to the whole thing. People report hearing robotic voices, whispers, and even Halloween music. Either people are seriously imagining things, or Microsoft and NASA have some explaining to do. Next up, number 3 now, we have Kill Switch. This game is just straight up creepy if it does actually exist. You see, back in 1989, this game was released in which the player had the choice of playing either a Ghast or a Porto. It was nearly impossible to play as Ghast because he was invisible, which meant that almost everyone chose Porto. Items you found appeared at the bottom of the screen. You find pieces of a tape recorder and could listen to events that transformed the mine you're in into the hell that it became. The game was eerie, hollow, empty, confusing, and just creepy all round. But the weirdest part is yet to come. The story goes that if anyone does complete the game, Kill Switch is designed to self-terminate. It deletes all traces of itself on the person's computer like it was never there at all. This is bad news because only a reported 5,000 copies were ever made. Apparently this continued to happen until every last copy was wiped and the company who made the game vanished from existence. A small community of people are trying to replicate the game based on the stories they've heard, but it's slow work and many people feel it's not worth the trouble it could ultimately bring. Moving on to number 2 now, we have Herobrine. Any of you guys who have played Minecraft will surely have heard of this character. When you first play the game, you'll have the ordinary standard skin. Now one day, early in the game's history, a player said he spawned in a brand new single player world. He was playing the game as normal, mining and building, when he saw something moving amongst the dense fog. He thought it was a cow and so chased it. It wasn't though. Staring back at him was a character that had the default skin, but his eyes were empty. There was no name above his head. He double checked to make sure he wasn't actually in a multiplayer server, and he wasn't. The character quickly ran off and disappeared. As the game went on, strange things kept happening. Parts of the game looked like someone had actually been there before, even though this was single player. Every once in a while he claimed to see the strange doppelganger watching him from the fog. After posting this story to the forums, he received a message from a user called Herobrine. It simply said, "Stop." Eventually he and some others found that Herobrine was the name of a Swedish player, possibly the brother of Notch, who is the creator of Minecraft. They asked Notch if he had a brother. He replied, "I did, but he is no longer with us." Thus, the legend was spawned of the creator's dead brother living on in the game's coding, watching players, watching every player, unaware of the afterlife he's ended up in. And finally, number 1 now, guys, we have Berserk. This was a very popular arcade game, first released back in 1980 and was a great success and highly addictive. However, it will always be remembered as the first game to be linked to the deaths of some of its players, 3 to be precise. The first was said to be Jeff Daly. He allegedly entered his initials twice in the Berserk machine's top 10 players list before dying of a heart attack. His score was 16,660. People say if you remove the binary numbers of 1 and 0, you get 666. The next victim was Jeff's friend, a guy called Peter Bukowski. Now, according to the arcade owner where this machine was housed, Peter arrived and began playing Berserk at 8:30 p.m. He was a top student who hoped to become a doctor one day. He was also very good at arcade games. After 50 minutes of playing, he posted his initials next to 2 high scores on the leaderboard. He then took 4 steps away, put a quarter into a different game, and then collapsed dead from a heart attack. The third death was said to happen to a guy who got into a fight over a quarter that was meant to be put into the Berserk machine. He was stabbed to death. Of course, people began to connect the dots and became convinced that this arcade machine had something to do with all the deaths. It's rare that a kid dies during or just after playing any video game, but 3 all connected to the same one. You can see why the legend of Berserk has persisted.